Its management. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thanks for joining us today. We are a live call-in talk show. Our call-in number for today, and we're trying to fix this with Zoom, is 646-931-3860, or contact WTOC 1310 AM, the local station. And then just if you call on your cell phone at the 646-931-3860, just do one tap mobile and you'll be able to enter into the Zoom chat. Now, having said that, I have my superstar today, Attorney Vanita Bank, a master's in tax, a cybersecurity expert, and she's a crack research analyst that does a lot of important research for our show. So thank you, Attorney Banks. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Good morning, Attorney Lee. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. There are so many issues that are present. Each day, we're in the middle of like a troublesome, bad dream. Each day we see state and local things that are occurring in the city. And then we see our national president, the new president, number 47, engage in a circus almost every day. And it's just too hard to keep up with the thing, but there is an attack on diversity and inclusion, affirmative action. And the net result is the current policies, the president, number 47, says that everyone has to go back to work and work full time. So the goal of this is very simple, is to make the government workers, which is the largest employer in the country, like 2 million workers, they're trying to make a lot of African Americans quit their jobs. And then they want to replace it with people that are essentially look like white supremacists. It's just a sad commentary, but the truth of the matter is that they're trying to get rid of the African American in government. It's a sad commentary. In the state of Indiana, our governor in the state, he is trying to out-Trump Trump. So it appears that they're trying to get rid of African American in Indiana state government. The first thing he did was eliminate DEI, but everybody forget about something that's important about our country. The United States has always had affirmative action. Affirmative action always worked this way in the past. Prior to the 60s, if you're white, you had political connection, or your family had wealth, you essentially got to the front of the line for education opportunity, employment opportunities, financing at banks. So you enjoyed benefits that was not available to minorities. The problem is they started giving minorities this type of treatment, and then now they're saying that it's illegal. So where we are now is that we're in a strange paradox in American democracy, folks. Are we going to allow our state and federal government to turn back the clock to 1961, 62? And that's going to be a challenge, because that's where it looks like we're trying to head in the area of civil rights. For Attorney Banks, this week, there's been so many crazy things happen with the inauguration. And the first thing that was troublesome is the president of the United States pardoned people who are white supremacists who attempted to overthrow the federal government. I didn't understand that. Didn't make any sense to me.
Yes, Attorney Lee, we have seen a lot of things this week since the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. But none of these things should be a surprise. Many of them have been documented in Project 2025, although the president stated that he was not familiar with it. Those that are implementing, there are many that are working currently in this administration to implement the playbook, which is Project 2025. And we'll talk about some of those things that were demonstrated in the close to 100 executive orders. Some have been announced, some not. But those that have been announced are consistent with Project 2025. In terms of the pardon of the 1,500 individuals, were, some of which pled guilty, and some of which were convicted of seditious conspiracy. All those individuals were pardoned in one of the orders issued by the president this week. One woman declined her pardon because she said she's guilty and she's sorry for that. His pardons included members of the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys who had been convicted. And in fact, with respect to Stephen Rhodes, the judge in that case ordered him and others not to go to the Capitol building and put some restrictions on them even going to DC. But the current Department of Justice is objecting to that, stating that their cases have been dismissed and therefore there should be no restrictions on their ability to move across the country. Meanwhile, the police officers who defended the Capitol that day, January 6th, who are the real patriots in the situation, they are scrambling to try to protect themselves and get protective orders, issued. As we saw last week, Stephen Jones actually be welcomed back to the Capitol building. So it is not a shocking situation, but it's certainly one that should concern all Americans.
It's what is tantamount to is that in banana republics that we refer to, developing nations who are ruled by strongmen, dictators, or folks who take the power away from the ordinary citizen, you see transition in government where you see haphazard administration. But America, what makes it exceptional is that we have rules of law. And for only, I think, the second time in American history that we had an attempt to overthrow the federal government right before our own eyes. We saw it on TV. And at the time that this attempted coup occurred, back on January 6th, 2021, everybody was in agreement exactly what it was. It was an attempt to overthrow the federal government. Lives were lost, people were injured. We have people, law enforcement officials, that have permanent injuries from this catastrophic event. Yet, we see people who are trying to normalize, who are trying to whitewash. And I use the term with sincerity, whitewash history. We're trying to see, we're seeing in our own eyes an attempt by some to rewrite American history. And it's a sad commentary in American democracy. So as a citizen, what can you do? As a citizen in this great country, at least it used to be great up until January 20th, at least, there are certain rights, and we're seeing an abrogation of those rights right before our eyes. The Fourth Amendment now with ICE is going straight to hell. I saw where they raided a business in New Jersey, went in, demanded ID on private property. That's a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. And so we're seeing a radical departure of our rights. And by the way, I got updated call-in numbers, 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. Try that number if you decide to call in. Now, we have a multitude of issues, and I didn't want to spend a whole show talking about these things, but the other issue is that we had a bunch of executive orders. Attorney Banks, do you have a chance to look at that over 100 executive orders?
Well, no, Attorney Lee, I did not have a chance to look at all of those 100 executive orders, but one of the orders that has been talked about a lot this week is the elimination of DEI initiatives and programs throughout the federal government. And so that's a big one. All DEI employees were put on, had 24 hours notice that they were put on administrative leave. And all employees were threatened that if they did not provide the identities of those other employees that may be implementing DEI programs under, different titles or labels, that they would be in under threat of some type of punitive action. And so I would say that a compatible executive order was the one that revoked the two executive orders which were issued under the Johnson administration. Again, just establishing equal opportunity employment rights, that there could be no discrimination based on race. And then in 1967, gender was added to that, but that there could be no discrimination based on race and national origin and other protected classes. Those two executive orders revoked, or the president's executive order revoked those two executive orders dating back to the Johnson administration. So let's talk about, just executive orders in general. The president does have a right to issue executive orders, but that right and those executive orders are limited to the extent that they're unconstitutional, right? And so there's several laws that have been enacted by Congress since 1965 and 1967, those two executive orders that prohibit discrimination. Those executive orders have been implemented in many laws, including Title VII, for example, where you can't discriminate in employment on the basis of national origin, race, gender, disability, etc. And so there's going to be a lot of litigation flowing out of these executive orders. There's already litigation regarding the executive order having to do with birthright citizenship. Over 2 dozen states filed a lawsuit against that executive order on the Tuesday after the Monday that it was issued. And the judge in that case issued a temporary restraining order stating that no action can be taken within 14 days while he hears arguments in that case And I want to find his quotes. First, he said that where were the lawyers in the room, because he's never seen an executive order that could be so blatantly unconstitutional.
Well, what was amazing for folks who thought, if they were minorities, thought it was a good idea to vote for the 47th president. These orders went beyond just Black folks. But the one that I was concerned about, he rescinded Executive Order 11246. This was the cornerstone of equal opportunities in the United States as relate to the federal government and contract. This executive order has been in place since 1965 under the Johnson administration. Essentially what it did, it mandated a federal contractor take affirmative action with respect to veterans, disabled workers, minorities, women, to give them equal opportunity to work on federal contracts. It's been something that every Republican, Democratic administration thought was a good idea up until now. So now what's excluded are Blacks and women. So the ability to get contracts, like for example, all the airports had to have minority participation to go with at least 10% at one time. And now you've been able to get Black vendors at places like such as airport. Well, under these orders, they don't say they don't want to do that anymore. So a lot of these employment opportunities have been abrogated. And then one example, of course, is the DE program, Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Program. These initiatives are not just about civil rights, but they were about to ensure opportunities aren't just limited based on a person's race, ethnic background, or disability, sexual orientation, or sex, or gender identity. They were just saying that we want to have a fair process of hiring and recruiting people in our country. We're recruiting people that are underrepresented in institution, and we're trying to ensure fairness in the hiring process. Now, these executive orders also targeted DEA as related to the Supreme Court decision in the Fair Admission versus Harvard case. That was a critical case that attacked affirmative action. The idea was that we want to have race was considered a factor. They're saying it can't be considered a factor. But the problem is, all these prestigious institutions, if your parents donated money to the school or they went there, so-called legacy, they left that intact. So if you were white and wealthy, you get a preferential treatment to get in these prestigious institutions. If you're Black and poor, you don't. And so that's result in a 60% reduction in the amount of Blacks being able to attend these type institutions in this year alone. And it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. So this process we're seeing is a reversal of rights of minority. Now, but what was fascinating, Attorney Banks, is that this immigration rule that the Trump administration administered wanted to get rid of all people coming to the country, including Cubans, not just Mexican, but Cuban. And all of a sudden, we've seen an outrage from the representatives down in Miami who supported these so-called border walls and things like that. All of a sudden, when they say we want to get rid of Cuban also, well, let's make an exception for people from Cuba. So they can come in the country illegally, but they're coming to the country, it's not illegal in her mind. So despite what goes on in Haiti, she thinks that Cuba should have preferential treatment over any other immigrants. And my thing is that all immigrants should be treated the same. They should have equal opportunity to come to the country and apply for citizenship. America is a country of immigrants. We're not a country that hardly 97% of people that live in our country their relatives are immigrants. African Americans were slaves, but the Europeans, they're immigrants, and Native Americans was here. But so we see all these issues that are coming to fruition, and it coming at us fast. It's almost impossible to keep up with these radical changes. Right before our eyes, we're seeing America become a more racist, restricted society. And we have to stand up and fight against this takeover by folks who are white supremacists.
And just taking this to the local level, I understand that there was no zero monies included in the state budget for Martin University in Indianapolis. And also, I saw, I'm not going to be able to call her name right now, I'll look it up maybe on the call, that your prior governor, Indiana governor, had a diversity office and a diversity director that did some incredible work in Indiana. As a matter of fact, her work resulted in her recently receiving the highest award in the state of Indiana, the Sagamore Award. But as this new governor has taken office there in Indiana, many of the state legislators have stepped up to criticize the zero allocation of funding for predominantly Black university, the Martin University there in Indianapolis, Nathaniel?
That's correct. And it's an important thing to realize what's going on. We had a representative who wrote a very forceful letter about this issue. And I was going to have one on the show today, but they haven't called in yet. But it had to do with the fact that Indiana, everybody forget that Lincoln was a Republican. And Lincoln, in history, he freed the slaves. So Republican originally was a party that got rid of slavery. And so Governor Holcomb, who's from Indianapolis and Pike Township, was a fair-minded, traditional Republican. And because of that, he believed in growth, he believed in diversity, and he included minorities in his administration. And he worked hard to make sure that the state would welcome them from all people of color, background, and economic status. As part of the process, there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion within state government. And all that was to make the state accessible to people of all background and color. Very simple, just is about fairness. The new governor, one of the first orders he signed was to get rid of anything having to do with diversity and inclusion. And it seems that the process is headed to the fact that we're trying to go to a discriminatory process. We're going to go away from what is fundamentally fair, and it's shameful, the path we're traveling. So Martin University is a private institution, and they receive from the government $5 million. It's not unusual for a private institution in Indiana to get government money. We do that with charter schools. They're a private institution, and they get millions of dollars in state funding. Martin University is no exception. And it was only $5 million. So the new governor is apparently attempting to dumb it down. What he did that was shocking, he wanted to get rid of the requirement to even have college degrees to do jobs for the state. So I guess his goal is to have the dumbest state employees in the country. I mean, it's just a dumb idea to not recognize the fact that people go to college to get educated, and educated people generally have to demonstrate they have the ability to learn to do things that will help our state. I'm not against people that don't go to college. It's just the fact is that taking away the degree requirement for employment, it's just a dumb idea. American exceptionalism requires to have educated people. We got to encourage people to get college degrees, particularly minorities. And so the idea that they took that away is terrible. Also, there was something a lot more sinister that this governor did, Attorney Banks, that I think that will cause a rippling effect. 30% of our minority community, over 30%, is involved in Medicare or Medicaid. So Medicaid in our state, if you don't have any source of employment, you can have health insurance basically for free. If you have reduced wages, it costs nominal cost. This was part of the Affordable Care Act. So the so-called Obamacare was adopted by Indiana under state Medicaid program. And the money that funded this was federal dollars. And the state had some involvement, but primarily it was a federal type program administered by the state. Well, our new governor said they no longer will allow them to advertise that you can get insurance through the state. Don't advertise. So by not advertising that you can get health insurance, that means that citizens who are entitled to it won't know about the program. So now we have sicker people going to the hospital, getting enormous bills without the ability to pay for the bills. So that means that because people get bills, they may have some reticence about going to the hospital, and their condition could worsen, could lead to more premature death or more severe illness. So it's just a sad commentary that when the state government start enacting legislation that everybody know will harm the citizens. It makes no sense.
And it has to be called out in the strongest terms. The point you're making about Medicaid, and unless people have to distinguish between Medicaid and Medicare, but Medicare is health insurance for poor people, right? Poor citizens that can't afford to pay for it. And so for the government to say that you can't advertise that right, and it's administered by the state, is just simply outrageous. But again, this is who half of our U.S. citizens voted into office. Your new governor is the second governor that has eliminated diversity, equity, and inclusion in all state agencies. And he's replaced it with what he's calling merit, excellence, and innovation, as you well know. And your former governor, Holcomb, had established the Office of the Chief Equity, Opportunity, and Inclusion Officer. And that was Kara Herring that I just mentioned. That office was closed, and she received the highest award that can be bestowed on a Indiana resident for her incredible work in that office. But West Virginia is the first state to eliminate state DEI by executive order. Now, with respect to signing the order requiring state personnel to review all to review all job postings and eliminate degree requirements, I guess for positions where they're not necessary. Attorney Lee, I think that determination should be made on a case-by-case basis. There obviously are some positions that will require college education, but maybe not all of them. So we'll see what happens with that order.
Well, it's a dumb idea. For example, where do you go with that? Like, we have specific requirement for almost everything you do. Like, for example, just to cut someone's hair, you have to have a barber's license or a beautician license. Do we think that's a bad idea to have people properly trained to do a basic service? And of course it is. We need to have people properly trained. And then all your healthcare profession. What, you want to go to a dentist who go to high school and read a book and try to work on your oral cavities or something? I mean, or where does it stop? Uh, we in the legal profession, we have to go to college for what in law school, it's about 7 years of schooling. And so, could we go back to days where we had courts in Indiana where we have judges that didn't have to go to law school? We got rid of that. We try to make it whereby people have an education to do the job, and that's important. This is what democracy should be. The most prosperous country in the world, we should have educated people doing jobs to further the goals and objectives of the state for the welfare of the people. I'm not against people who don't go to college that's working. That's fine. But the problem we have is that when you eliminate the education requirement, it's simple things in our state, for example, forklift operators. Forklift operators have to have training and get certification. So do you want persons now to operate forklift without training and education requirement? It's not a degree, but where does this stop? See, if you eliminate the training and education requirement, even from some of the basic jobs, these are important jobs because now we're e-commerce. We use warehouses and things like that. So eliminate the education, you're going to have more injuries and fatalities on the job. It's just that simple. So I'm 100% against the idea of eliminating education requirement and degree requirement. I think it's important. I think that in America, we should do it just opposite. We should put more money into education to have more people have access to college degrees and get certification so consumer could get the best possible products. And that's why I think it's important, Counselor. Now, the second issue has to do with this insurance, Healthy Indiana plan. The monthly payment can range from $1 to $20 a month for people who are not working. And because this insurance is available to everyone, this must be advertised for people to know about it. So for all those folks who have friends and relatives who don't have health insurance, if you down on your luck and you're not able to make a lot of money, if you are individual, if you make less than about $21,000 a year, you can get insurance for a reduced cost or free through the Health Indiana plan. And that number is 877-GET-HIP-HIP9 or 877-438-4479. So you can get the Health Indiana insurance plan. And we're going to talk about that on our show on a regular basis so the folks can be educated. They can go out and get health insurance because there's so many folks, Attorney Banks, that get ill and they don't go to hospital because they don't want to incur a bill. And that's just bad. People are sick every day, particularly we had this really bad weather. We get viruses and severe infectious process, and people just can't afford to pay for medical care. And they have to suffer, and I don't want that to happen. So make sure that you have your friends and neighbors get the insurance. Now, what was the next topic, Attorney Banks?
Well, when we talk about DEI, let's look at the confirmation last evening of Pete Hegseth, who was confirmed. This is the Fox News host and Army veteran who was confirmed last evening to be the U.S. Secretary of Defense. And so he's now in charge of the federal government's largest agency after a tie-breaking vote last night by Vice President J.D. Vance. The Department of Defense is the largest employer in the country with over 2.8 million employees. The uh, investigative process for Pete Hegseth's confirmation revealed a history of alcoholism, sexual harassment, and violence against women. In even his mother's own terms, she said that he had been abusive against women. Mismanagement of two nonprofit veterans organizations. This is just really, hypocrisy. On the one hand, you decry DEI programs and you suggest that those professionals are um, are not meritorious in terms of their expertise, but on the other hand, you confirm this gentleman who has no qualifications whatsoever to run the Department of Defense.
Well, counsel, let's call it what it is. It's affirmative action. It's traditional affirmative action. That's how it was in the past. If you were white, you were privileged, you had connections, you got position like this, even if you were not even remotely qualified. And I don't have a problem with that so long as they give that same consideration to minorities, which what they've eliminated. So affirmative action got a person who should not be in a position at all, should not have been considered. But that's the affirmative action, and we need to call it what it is. And because of that, he got probably the second most powerful position, well, the third most powerful position in our federal government. Secretary of State, I think, is probably, one of the largest agency in terms of power and control than the Department of Defense. And, other than outside the executive branch, that's an important function. And with the number, their budget is off the chart, probably over $870 billion a year, something insane. And that's a lot of power that you give by affirmative action.
Absolutely
So
right. With the budget of $850 billion, no expertise, and the experience for this job, the job description, uh, I'm sure states a lot more than the fact that you were a member of the military.
yeah, it's terrible.
And then he's coming in, and the first thing he's doing is eliminating all DEI initiatives in the Department of Defense. And he just got his job based on favoritism and cronyism.
Well,
Interestingly, Senator Mitch McConnell voted against his confirmation, as well as women senators Collins and Muraski. So it was 50-50. The tiebreaker was President J.D. Vance.
we have a senator who demonstrated over the last 4 years that he could be a moderate and be fair, Senator Young. And quite frankly, I was surprised that he didn't vote against this because he knows better. But what was interesting is that he's up for re-election during the midterm, and they made it known that if you vote against Trump, whether you're a congressional person or a senator, they're going to find somebody running against you in the primary. And so they're saying it's widely known now that these senators or congressperson, if they don't vote a certain way, they got the world's richest man going to spend millions of dollars to get them knocked off in the primary, coupled with the White House, who will then support your opponent. So
I say
now,
when you stand for something, you fall for anything. So you have to speak truth to power. That's called integrity. That's called courage. That's called character, none of which exists anymore. So
That's
you get
terrible.
kicked out in the primary. You go down speaking truth to power. Another reason we need term limits on these positions as well. And Attorney Lee, I see in the chat box our our frequent caller Pierre. He's asking about the potential fate of the CLEO program in the state of Indiana.
Well, I've been working on that behind the scene, and it's kind of tough. But what Clio, the early days, why it was such a popular event is that it included minorities, but also it included the economic part, white farmers. So farmers have incredible wealth in terms of land, but they also have significant debt. So they may be land rich, but money poor. And because of that, we have a shortage in the uh, farming community in terms of lawyers because they need to have lawyers and family members. The CLEO program passed almost unanimously. It was a great program. So what we'll probably see with the iCleo, we'll probably see more white farmers type folks get into the program, and it's probably fewer African Americans. But I think that the program is going to survive. And I know our Chief Justice, former Chief Justice, a big, strong proponent of it because he was a great leader, generational leader for our Supreme Court, probably one of the best we've ever had in the state's history. And he believed in fairness for all individuals. And he was traditional Republican in the mode of the Lincoln Republican, not the current MAGA type Republican. But having said that, um, I think that it's going to survive, but be modified slightly, whereby you're going to see fewer African Americans. Because right now in Indiana, folks, we have a shortage of lawyers. And I know it's hard to believe with all the advertising you see on TV, but there's actually a shortage, particularly of African American attorneys. Um, we have hiring goals, and it's a very competitive market now. Because
Oh, it's not just,
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I, my recollection is that CLEO is not just a program for African American law students or potential law students, that it is a program that is focused on, again, increasing minority participation in law to be more reflective of our communities. But, and that also encompasses students from disadvantaged communities as well. Is that your sense,
Well,
Nathaniel?
it was minority and economically deprived, and
There,
economic included poor whites. And
exactly.
so currently there's a lot of uh, economically disadvantaged whites that are getting in the program, and it's a fair system in the sense that uh, you need to have poor white folks become lawyers too. They have some of the same challenges that poor black folks have.
And that's
And
why
like,
when
for
you're
example,
targeting, go ahead, I'm
a good
sorry.
example is healthcare. Healthcare is a big deal, whether you're white or black, if you don't have money. You get sick. If you can't afford to pay your doctor bills or pay for medication, what do? Well, you get sick, you die sooner, or you're in more pain. And so we need to have that process for poor folks, be make it available because they face the same challenges.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent example. We have to keep in mind that African Americans represent 13, 14% of the population in this nation. And then there's everybody else, right? And there's this
Yes.
notion of, however, cognitive dissonance where you vote against your best interests. So there are going to be a lot more white citizens in this nation suffering from some of these executive orders and initiatives than African Americans or people of color. And so, in time, that fact will become more glaring, Attorney Lee. So far, we haven't heard anything about how the cost of eggs is going to be decreased, right? We haven't heard anything about what they ran on ostensibly. They claim, there's so many commentaries talking about, debriefing uh, the election results. And so there's so many different views on that the American public was focused on the economy, the price of groceries and gas, right? And that they were not focused on, quote, these culture wars. Well, these executive orders are evidence of the culture war that's being waged by this new administration. People don't understand that. You haven't heard anything this week about how the cost of Medicaid is going to be reduced or the cost of basic goods and services, including groceries, is going to be reduced. You haven't heard anything like that. All you've heard about is reducing or eliminating DEI programs in federal procurement, and throughout the federal government, including, contracting and procurement offices. You've heard they even took down, Nathaniel, the Spanish translation web pages. They were taken down. Can you believe that? The U.S. government offices or the U.S. Gov website Spanish translation web page has been taken down.
That's terrible. Hey, here's a big secret that most people don't realize. Illegal, undocumented immigrants paid $59.4 billion in 2022 in taxes, and the state contribution was $37.3 billion. So in other words, the federal government benefits by getting a substantial amount of money from undocumented illegal immigrants who get no benefits from the federal government. They don't get Social Security, they don't get unemployment benefits, they don't have access to certain benefits like driver's license and things like that, and yet they're paying enormous amount of taxes. Most Americans don't realize that they're paying taxes, have no benefits that they're receiving as a typical American. If they get sick, they can't get Social Security disability if they become disabled, but yet they pay taxes the same as you do and I do. And so net result is that the money that they pay goes to the federal government, and that's what helped with our budgetary system. If we took away the contribution of illegal immigrants and undocumented, it's going to cause a bigger deficit, a larger deficit in programs such as Social Security. They're helping funding your retirement. That's right. So the people they're trying to kick out of the country is helping funding their retirement income. They're helping funding the federal government. So that's one of the things that most folks don't know.
And this first, it's also important to understand that immigration into the United States is down. It's down to 2017 numbers. So this pretense that we've got all these immigrants, right, that are rushing into the United States, it's just really a myth, number one. And number two, when they talk about immigrants that have been convicted of crimes, everybody agrees with that, right? That's been happening. But what again, we should have expected it. Yesterday in Chicago, a grade school was infiltrated by ICE during the middle of the school day.
Oh, that's terrible.
Just to show that this administration is enforcing the immigration laws and taking action that they claim the people want, which is to rid us of, quote, illegal immigrants to this state, to this country. Again, a culture war issue, an othering, right?
This is terrible. I saw in New Jersey, Attorney Banks, where they came into a private business with ICE agent. And we have Representative Bartlett just entered the room. Representative Bartlett, how you doing today, sir? Can you hear me okay, sir?
How are you?
Hello? Great. Real quickly, we have a few minutes. Tell us about this problem with the governor and what he's done that's so insulting.
It's been several things. One, gotten rid of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we voted in the budget in 2023 to, we've never given Martin University any money. It's the only predominantly Black institution in the state of Indiana. We've never given them any money. In the budget of 2023, they asked for $20 million. They cut it down to 10. It was to give it to them in two different parts, $5 million in 2024, $5 million in 2025. And the first two orders of the governor, when he took his seat, was to do away with that, stop that through executive order, and stop diversity, equity, and inclusion through executive order. But there are several bills that just attack us, which, and I spoke last night, and I said, we are at war. And that's what I believe it to be.
Wow.
Senate Bill 289. This bill provides that a school corporation, charter school, state agency, political subdivision, or an employee of a school corporation, charter school, state agency, or political subdivision may not, in the course or scope of public service or employment, promote, embrace, or endorse stereotypes. The bill also establishes a process for an employee, a parent, or an emancipated student to file a complaint of violation. It allows the attorneys general to file an action or mandate to compel a school corporation, charter school, state agency, or political subdivision to comply with certain requirements. And these requirements in this bill requires a school corporation, charter school, state agency, and political subdivision to post on its website certain trainings and curricular materials concerning non-discrimination, diversity, equity, inclusion, race, ethnicity, sex, and bias. It provides that a school corporation, charter school, state agency, or political subdivision may not require or otherwise compel a student or the school corporation or charter school or an employee to affirm, adopt, or to adhere to certain beliefs or concepts, or to use public funds to contract with, hire, or otherwise engage consultants, trainers, or other persons to take certain actions to promote the beliefs or concepts. So that they don't want any DEI training, any fairness training, any Black history training. House Bill 235 is another bill that's extremely dangerous. 1136, of course, we all know about it. It's dangerous, and they are attacking from so many angles. And but in my opinion, this does not just start. I don't know how much time we got, but this just did not start when.
Hey, Representative Barton, what we'll do is that we'll start with this next week. We're at the end of our show now, but we'll start next Saturday with this discussion because it's important that we educate the public. Also, I want you next week when you come on the show to talk about the health insurance and what that we need to do to fix that problem. So I thank you for calling in. I want you to call back in next Saturday and so we can educate the public about what's going on. And we probably, because we have so many things, Representative Bartley, that's going on, we probably have to have this added on because I think the citizens of our states need to know what our government is doing. So thank you for calling in today, and I look forward to you calling next Saturday. Now, folks, you've been listening to Legally Speaking with attorney Vanita Breaks today, my Crike research analyst. And join us next Saturday. We will continue this important dialogue. So thank you and take care. And remember, be safe out there. Take care, everyone. Talk to you next Saturday.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.